Welcome to our 123rd podcast with our special guest, Andrew Ourique. Today we're talking about inclusive change management. What's one thing you can do to ensure your change initiative is as inclusive as possible? Keep listening to find out. Welcome to Harmonious Workplaces, a podcast about corporate culture, organizational change management, and workplace behavior. Harmonious Workplaces was started by independent consultants to explore and challenge workplace issues and to build better ways of working. It's a blend of theory and practice, grounded in real-world experience, working with organizations of all sizes across a wide range of industries. If you own a business, lead a team, want fresh ideas about the workplace, or just enjoy listening to consultants talk candidly about how to make work more effective and more enjoyable, we invite you to sit back, relax, and dive in with us to Harmonious Workplaces. Hello, Harmonious Workplaces listeners. Welcome back to our podcast. I'm Rich Cruz, an organizational development consultant, joined by Ben Kleinman. Ben, you are the mayor of change management today.
And here in Chicago, that is saying something.
Oh,
Hey,
boy.
Rich, everyone.
And so, Ben, we had a guest on last week or last episode talking about belonging in the workplace.
Mhm.
And we are thrilled to have our guest today from Canada,
Woohoo!
Andrew Ourique. How are you, Andrew?
I'm great. I'm great, Rich. I'm great, Ben. Thank you so much for having me. I'm
Welcome.
really excited to have this conversation.
Yeah, talking about like being inclusive in change management. Boy, like it seems revolutionary, and yet it seems like it should be happening every day.
It does. It's a lot like a lot of change management concepts, right? It seems like common sense, and yet we have to remind everybody to do it.
Right, absolutely. So, Andrew,
Right.
just a little bit about yourself here. So it says that in your bio here that you're the founder and principal consultant of Reroute Consulting, where you work with internationally. So you work internationally with organizations navigating large-scale business transformations with a focus on mergers and acquisitions and technology-enabled change. Wow, that is quite a bit of a lift to do.
Yeah, it sounds really good on paper. It's pretty chaotic in reality.
Sure.
You know, it's funny, Rich, when you were reading that, I thought, and, being the mayor of Chicago, I thought you said murders and acquisitions.
Oh, mergers.
So
The mergers, people.
when Andrew's saying it's a little chaotic, I'm thinking, oh, this
Yeah.
is going to be a banger of an episode.
Yes, please let's not get that confused.
Right on.
No.
Yes,
This is all
absolutely.
very above board. We know Rich has a guy, and that's a whole separate thing. We've talked about that on prior
Oh,
episodes.
okay.
Yeah.
It would be less than useless in that context, I think.
Yeah. Andrew, in all seriousness, thank you for being on the show. I am really glad that you're able to join us because I've seen you in so many different ACMP, Association for Change Management Professionals, meetings and events and other activities. And it's just been such a great experience to listen to your own podcast. And you have such a nice, natural way of being the host and even being the guest on your own show. So I'm really, really excited to get you on our show here and just have a nice little chat.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I know we've been talking about getting the podcast together for a long time. I'm so glad that we had a chance to do it finally.
Yeah, cool.
Absolutely.
So
Sure.
should we dig in? Where would you like to start? Tell us about inclusivity.
Myself? Yeah, I would love to. I mean, we're talking inclusive change management, right? So I
Yes.
feel like, and I feel like with a lot of things, a lot of the times we need to like start with the definition of what we're talking
Please.
about when it comes to inclusive change management.
Yeah.
We love a
'Cause I
good
think it-
definition.
Yeah, we always like to
right?
start there too,
Definitions
so that's
are
great.
so important, right? And I think I've started to think a lot about this because with a lot of the work that we do internationally, it's just so important to think about, inclusivity.
Mhm.
And I think when we think about inclusivity, a lot of the times we think about, DEI
Mhm.
initiatives,
Sure.
diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that's 100% super important, but it's not the only thing that matters when it comes to change management. When we think about inclusive change management, or at least when I think about it, it's really about trying to figure out and set a common direction while also deliberately trying to identify all the different groups that are going to be experiencing the change and adapting to this new way of doing things, right? So if we think about this whole concept, it's really more about like cognitive diversity in and of itself, which I think captures everything. It
Sure.
captures differences in culture, geography, roles, tenures, are you somebody who's just about to retire, or are you somebody net new into the organization? And so it's really this all-inclusive bucket,
Yeah.
inclusivity has
Right.
like an inclusive element to it, right? And
Yeah.
even generationally, like I think right now, we have never had so many generations in the workforce
That's right.
at the same
Absolutely.
time, right? I think boomers to Gen Z now,
Sure.
and each of them have their own way of doing things and experiencing things.
hmm
So I really think this is such a topical discussion, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So many memes out there, by the way, of the cross generalization.
Right.
The
You
not
know,
generalization, but cross generations, in the workforce. Yeah.
yeah. And I hire some interns, so I've had a chance to work directly with, the Gen Zs, I think the most
Yeah.
recent. And, I've worked in banking for a long time, so a lot of boomers in banking. So I feel like I've had a chance to see the differences that exist within all the different, generations. And there is significant differences. And even culturally and internationally, when I'm working on changes, within UK to Central Europe to Asia to Australia, there's little, nuances. But I think what's really interesting is that at the core, we all share very similar things, across all of those different buckets. But it's respecting those nuances that I think go a really long way.
hmm
For
I
sure.
was going to ask you, Andrew, if you could expand on that, because I'm sure that there are lots of differences that are probably there, and some of them are probably very obvious. Like you have an accent that's a little bit different than mine, and you live in a different city than mine, and you guys are probably both a lot younger than me, and that kind of stuff. You both have more hair than I do, so very, very big differences there. But in terms of the commonalities, what are some of those threads that you see that are good ones for you as coming in as especially coming as an external, and you can say, okay, you're all different. I want to respect that. I want to harness that, but you're also, the same in these ways, and you all buy into this maybe specific culture, or what are some of those that you found that you can kind of grasp onto to help people through a change?
Yeah, I think naturally, which is, very, very encouraging, is that at the end of the day, people really want to do the right thing. They want to kind of be part of the change.
Okay.
And I think this element of like wanting to be part of it and not just a passenger, along the ride,
Mhm.
I think is something that I've found constantly across every region, organization, generation. They all want to be part of it.
Sure.
And I think for me anyway, this idea of, trying to take whatever feedback that you get, because it's as important for yourself as the change manager or practitioner coming in to really be open to a lot of the feedback that's coming through, because there's so much complexity and there's so much like undertone. There's so many things that are between the lines that you kind of have to figure out, that you really have to see the feedback as a privilege, and it
Yeah.
really is, because a lot of the times, I say like when I think about like the biggest risk that we have in change, it's silence, nobody's
Mm.
saying anything to you,
Right.
and so I think the idea of, really creating that space for people, that they feel trusted, they feel safe to share with you, and then them sharing it with you, like that's such a privilege to have. And honestly, it's one of my, like we talk about like success. That's my biggest success, is if I know for a fact that people are being honest and transparent with me. I always know I'm on the right track when somebody starts the conversation out by being like, I can't believe I'm telling you this. And they'll tell me,
Right.
or,
You achieve
it's
that
like, this stays
insider
between
status.
us,
Yeah.
this stays between us. And it always does. But, there's nothing that brings me more joy than knowing that somebody feels super safe to be able to share with me, like, the good, the bad, and the ugly,
Yeah.
and I see that countlessly. Everyone wants to be part of it, and everyone wants to share their honest truth, right? And so you really need to create that environment where people feel comfortable enough to do that for you, because it pays so much dividends down the road for you, because at the end of the day, we don't ever have the right answer. We just try, but they do, they know what they need. And so we just need to create the space to listen, and it goes a long way.
Andrew,
Absolutely.
how have you managed to do that? You said that you've been able to do that pretty successfully across some of the differences we've been talking about. What's your secret?
Yeah. It's not, it's like, it sounds like it's so, but there's gotta be like a secret code to
You're
it
like a
all,
people whisperer.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. I think at the end of the day, I try to just think of them as humans, like in myself,
Go figure.
Go figure, and a lot of the times people, it's having those one-on-one conversations, I know a lot of the times, especially with the size of, the organizations and the changes we're dealing with, like we go from like working on changes for 1,000 people to one that I'm working on right now that's 10,000 people. And you kind of get overwhelmed, right? By like, I can't talk to everybody. It's like, yeah, no, you can't talk to everybody. It's
Right.
impossible. You could talk to a few of them, So just because you can't talk to everybody doesn't mean that you don't talk to anyone. And so I really think it's trying to understand, like, who do I need to talk to in order to get that sense? And we do this a lot through like the change networks, the change ambassador, change agent networks that we establish. But a lot of the times it's like in groups,
Mm-hmm.
and I think trying to get down to that one-on-one level is huge, and bringing them along the journey for the change is really important. Like we talk about this all the time, but we always kind of get it wrong. It's more of like a checkbox that we think about doing. It's like, oh yeah, no. We tested this out, the change agents. Like they had a ton of feedback, but we're not going to do anything. We're going to still do exactly what we thought we were going to do.
Sure.
But yeah, we checked with them on it. Yeah, they don't like it, but but they heard about it. So that's probably good enough. And I think that's the biggest issue when it comes to inclusive change management. It's like you need to be inclusive, you need to actually listen and react and action what you hear, right? So there's so much we've done where it's like, we're gonna go out to this group, we're gonna get the feedback, and then it just goes nowhere. We don't change the approach. And so you do need to commit to gathering the feedback and actually doing something with it for it to be successful and for it to be truly inclusive. Because then it's not inclusive at all. It's literally just the same product. You just happen to get people's thoughts on it early,
Sure.
and nothing changes.
Sure.
So that it's a tough thing. We got to get away from that checkbox, and we really got to just get down to basics, really, which is, talk to people one-on-one, ideally, make them feel. And I will say, it is a little bit easier for me because I'm independent, so especially working in mergers and acquisitions, mergers.
Yeah.
Mergers.
Make
Yes.
sure, let's
Yes.
make sure.
Crystal clear. Thank you.
Yes.
So
Companies coming together.
I'm neutral, I'm not from the acquired company. I'm not from the company that acquired them. I'm coming in as a complete independent. And so that does help, because they don't see me as part of the us versus them. They see me as somebody that's like in between.
Sure.
So that does definitely help things. And I'd be remiss to not mention that there is that element that I feel like somebody who's from the acquired company, it might be difficult for them to get the same trust and the same honesty that I would get.
That makes sense.
Mhm.
Hey, Andrew, let's take a quick break. And when we come back, I do have a question about how, because we've talked about buy-in, and boy, you're working in these different industries that probably require some work on your end to get buy-in. Am I mistaken in that?
Maybe a little bit.
Maybe a little bit. Okay. All right. So we'll take a quick break and we'll be right back. At Harmonious Workplaces, We believe work should provide purpose, satisfaction, and growth. We empower people to thrive by fostering environments where individuals can find meaning in their work and organizations can succeed through thoughtful, well-executed strategies. We're committed to making work better for the people who do it and the leaders who guide them. To discover how harmonious workplaces can impact your organization, visit www.harmoniousworkplaces.com and book a free 30-minute information session with one of our consultants today. Again, that's www.harmoniousworkplaces.com. And we're back. So, Andrew, talking about having inclusivity in your change initiatives, right? But I look at your bio here and you work in finance, engineering, infrastructure, healthcare, technology, and sports. Outside of the sports realm, which I don't know too much about, but all the other ones, like these are really, really regulated organizations, right? And efficiency and effectiveness are, probably paramount, right? And so that leads me, just from my personal experience, Ben, you've worked in healthcare, right? I'm just wondering,
Yeah.
do
Lots
you
of
need to
compliance
really,
regulation.
what's that?
Lots of compliance. You have to comply with all
Compliance.
the healthcare regulations, good
Right,
manufacturing processes, all of that.
right. And so I've seen the human element sometimes gets, takes a back seat to, to the, just getting the work done, right? And so how do you get that buy-in to be able to create this inclusive environment?
Yeah, I think it's really tough when it comes to those heavily regulated. Like I was in the banking industry for a long time, and during that time I was an employee, so there's a lot of
Right.
being the yes man, a lot of rather than coming in with your own sort of approach that I've been able to do for the last several years with Reroute. But I think at the end of the day, the goal is the same, regardless whether it's a compliance related, initiative, or it's a merger and acquisition. Because at the end of the day, you want to get to that certain outcome as quickly as possible. When you have a compliance, you usually are going to get fined if you don't comply.
Sure.
With merger and acquisition, you bought a company because they generate, certain revenue, and you want them to continue to generate, if not generate more, now that you've acquired them. And the sense of urgency there, in all cases, is very high. And especially with the merger and acquisition, you also don't want to lose your core people along that journey that you bought, because that, especially in service industries, which I've worked exclusively in, they are your revenue generators.
That's the
And
value,
so
right? Yeah. That
that's the
human
value.
capital, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So there is that sense of like implied buy-in almost, because all leaders want to, they don't want to mess with the vibes of the organization. They want to make sure they feel like they're coming along the journey. And I think the easiest way, or the most effective way to do it, and it's not nothing's fail safe. There's always times where it's just it's not gonna work, and then the conversation is a different one. But I think getting in front of that sponsor, that leader, assuming we have a sponsor, but getting in front of the leaders and really having those conversations openly and honestly with them to say, this is the situation, and this is what I need from you, and this is what I need from your leaders, and here's what I think we can do in order to create a plan that I think is going to help as many of these people move along this journey with you. Like, what do you think? Getting that buy-in early from that leader one-on-one is honestly really important. Now, and I know some leaders are just like, no, this is a waste of time, And I think, and I can't take credit for this quote, unfortunately, because it did come from a client of mine, but he told me, he said, it's either you pay now or you pay now with interest. And that, for me, is so true. and it's so hard to argue. And when it comes to, integrations with companies, at a certain point, we need them. We need certain like groups of those employees to help us help them. And that's going to impact their revenue generation. So yeah, we are going to have to pay in order to get to where we need to go. But it's either we pay now or we pay later with interest because adoption slows, resistance builds. We lose trust because our solutions aren't aligned with what they need. And that delays adoption. And that means we have to go back in and repair things. And it's funny you say the sport you might not know, because I think I want to give an example from sports where
Oh
this
yeah,
kind of
sure,
happens.
please.
Yeah.
Because it's, I hope and I feel like everyone can relate to this. And it was honestly a bit of like a lesson learned for me. It was like an area where I feel like I could have done a little better. But when I was working in sport, we were working on implementing a new technology platform. It was like a customer relationship management platform for the sport, handling memberships and all of that type of
Sure.
stuff. The approach that was going to be adopted was going to be adopted across each of the provinces and within Canada. Don't ask me how many. I really did terrible in geography, but all of them, all of them. And the central team, so the national team, was very focused on, what do we need from national, sort of objective. We want to be able to make sure that every province is handling membership, handling events, all the same way. But what I failed to get captured as part of that was understanding really what the provinces need and what the provinces do.
Mm.
And it was only through that process that we realized how different each province was, to not just what nationally they wanted to do, but even within the province, like even regionally, citywide, club based, there were such major differences to how they handled memberships, how they handled events, that without that understanding of like what each of the individual stakeholders did, coming up with a national strategy out the gate was completely flawed.
Sure.
And there were a ton of mistakes along the way with this one. One of them being that they launched anyway.
Oh.
And
How did it go?
which you know what? It's still going 3 years later.
Oh, the
There's
launch?
still the fixes
Oh,
that
I
are
see.
needing
Yeah,
to
yeah.
go into
Okay.
place.
So it was a little
And
bumpy.
really bumpy, the bumpiest I've ever seen, honestly. And it's just constant fixes, and still clubs and provinces are doing their old ways of doing things to help bridge the gap. Millions of dollars invested, millions of dollars lost. And all because of just not doing that due diligence of understanding and providing that support at the local level to really understand what's going on before coming up with the national strategy. It was such a remarkable learning experience. And the funny thing about, not the funny thing, but the interesting thing about that whole project was there were checkpoints with provinces the whole way through. But I
Really?
think what was interesting was it was very surface level, and it was gather feedback, but not enough of commitment to actually do something with it. And I think that is the key. And that is such a common mistake. I think you can really kill inclusive change management by going out, trying to solicit feedback and doing nothing with it.
Doing nothing with it.
You might as well just not even try. If you're going to go out for feedback, you got to commit to doing something with it. Otherwise, just don't bother. It does way more harm than.
Do you have a sense, Andrew? I mean,
That makes
I
sense.
completely agree. Why? Do you have a sense of why the organization was gathering all this feedback, but not recognizing it and at least speaking to it, if not actioning some of it? Do you, like,
There's
I understand if
always
it's confidential, I don't want to pry, but if
no,
any
no,
like
no,
lessons,
no.
higher
But I
level
think,
lessons learned you could share.
yeah, I think overall, it's about trying to really get clear on what success looks like at the end of the day, and really holding people accountable to what that success is. Um, when I think about success of any, initiative, I always think about the employee experience along the way. And that needs to be kind of a core functionality. But if I think about the success of this, adoption here, it's things like not, leveraging existing alternative technology to help fill a gap that this new one is supposed to solve. Because that was the whole business case. It's like, hey, we've got provinces and clubs using this platform or all these different platforms under different licenses.
Mm.
Let's remove all of that and create one license, one global license everyone does, global national
And
license.
presumably everybody's in the
And
same system, and you can,
yeah,
if you move
exactly.
province or whatever, you'd be able to have your membership
Have the same experience. Yeah.
same experience.
Exactly. And it's, holding the people accountable for that, I think would have made it really difficult for folks to ignore feedback right
Mm.
along the way, because that down the road, your success is going to be measured by if people use this thing or not. But a lot of the times it's just surface level, it's like your success is based off of like the launching of the thing rather than people actually using the thing, which is so backwards sometimes. Um, and I think there's the element of resourcing too. Nonprofit organization. There's limited resources to be able to really understand and trying to harness all of the feedback in a way that you can actually do something with it. And I think there's an element of, that maturity of the organization that in this case was I think also a risk, especially as it relates to change management.
Mm.
And I think we talked about it a little bit earlier. There's a lot of common sense elements that go into change management, right? Or at least a lot of people think so. But when it comes down to actually the execution of it, they start to realize how complex and difficult it really is to do what they think is common sense, just because it's like, oh yeah, we need to bring people along. It's asking people about how they feel. It's like, yeah, that makes sense. But it's the doing the stuff after that is the complex part that not a lot of people understand and get until it's too late. I will say, I don't think this organization will make the same mistake twice. And as long as you learn from it at the end of the day, I think that's the value. Everyone makes mistakes. I made mistakes. I was part of this project.
Sure.
So I made a mistake, right?
Yeah.
But I learned from it and I'll never make that mistake again. And I think as long as that happens, that's the important part at the end of the day. Because mistakes, especially in this field, are going to happen more than success. And so you just need to learn from it and try not to make the same one.
That makes
Love
sense.
that. Love that. Rich, I'm guessing that we want to take another break.
Mm-hmm.
When we come back, Andrew, can you share a little bit more about how you take your approach of getting to know people, trying to get as many of the one-on-ones as possible, and how you scale that? You mentioned you're on a gig now where you've got some 10,000 people. Hard to do 10,000 one-on-ones, but how you scale your approach to either those interviews or conversations, I should say, or how you create some kind of facsimile.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
Absolutely. Love to hear that. We'll be right back.
Oh, hi. I'm Hermie, the HR hermit crab. So, if you've ever sat in a meeting thinking, are we all talking about the same thing? I have a book that might feel very familiar. In my third cartoon book, Trust Fall Pratfalls, you'll find a collection of short, funny workplace moments. The kind that make you laugh and then immediately think, yeah, we do that. We cover things like unclear priorities, communication that somehow creates more confusion, leaders who mean well but miss the mark, and employees trying to make sense of it all. It's basically a highlight reel of how the heck did this happen? But each story also contains evidence based, valuable information such as simple ways to communicate better, practical ways to support your team, and small changes that make work a little more, well, workable. You can finish each story in just a couple of minutes and actually use the lessons the next day. Plus, it's a cartoon book, so you can leave it on your desk and be the envy of all your cubicle mates. Check out Herbie the HR Hermit Crab Trust Fall Pratfalls, available now on Amazon. Visit www.hermiehrhermitcrab.com or www.harmoniousworkplaces.com/Herbie. Oh, and if you see your workplace in here, maybe don't read it out loud in the next staff meeting. Make change your friend. Bye.
And we're back. Okay, Ben. So you teed up before we went to the break. You teed up. How do we scale this? So Andrew, how do you scale in a 10,000 person change initiative? How do you scale that inclusive element?
Yeah, it's it's really tough, but I think if you've got the buy-in from leaders and with a change this size, you tend to, because they recognize the complexity that is involved in something like this, trying to get 10,000 different people, especially globally, across the
Right.
finish line with you in a way that, especially with an acquisition, keeps them all, with you, which is the most important thing. And I've gone through my own kind of test and learn journey here because I've been involved in a couple of international acquisitions, even, between North America versus US, I kind of still see very similar things. And, I've gotten it wrong enough times to, to start to see the light a little bit. But the approach that, we're taking for this one in particular comes from a lot of the lessons that we've learned in past integrations of this nature. And I think it's this idea of one, resourcing appropriately, because I think a lot of the times organizations feel like we can take just one change manager for a change, regardless of size, regardless of like dollar amount, and they can figure it out. We can like just bring on more people from the employee base and they can help as change ambassadors or the change network. And then that doesn't really work. They've got their own full-time job. But it's really making sure that you're resourcing appropriately for the change based on complexity, not by size or anything like that, which is kind of like a myth, I guess, that I feel like within the integration space that like I think I want to bust first and foremost is this element of like, you have an integration, let's say, that's happening in multiple regions, Asia, UK, Central Europe, US, Latin America. And the focus always goes to, okay, where are the most people going? And that's where we're going to dedicate most of our resources. But it has really very little to do with that, because even if you're integrating with 5 people in a country versus 1,000, you got to do the same stuff, right? And I think there is more pressure on you when it's a smaller population, not the reverse. Because when it's smaller, people have much higher expectations that you get it right. It's like, I've got 5 people coming into this country. How do you mess that up? Like, you can't. But
Sure.
the steps are all the same,
Sure.
For 1,000, you're like, okay, like people can understand that you might get that wrong. And so it's really important to match resourcing first with complexity, not with size or dollar of the deal or anything like that. That's super important. And getting that right off the bat is really crucial. And setting up the team in a way where you've got the ability to create kind of like a global approach, to change. Like, how do you want globally this change to, for the integration, using that as an example, but then allowing this space for regional reps to be able to customize that overall approach to the context of the region. And if you are so blessed and are so lucky to get it even one step further and get it down to like an office level or a city level, that would be amazing. But I've never gotten to that yet. But I think overall, that's how we're setting up this one. And I'm very excited about the possibility of what we will be able to do with a team that is resourced And with all of the kind of elements in place, strong sponsorship from leadership, really strong change management experience from the team. But there's always room for improvement. So I'm really excited to see, what we can do. I think one of the other things I'll call out, which I myself have already told on other podcasts and stuff that I don't do enough of, but have committed myself this year to doing more of is a really true stakeholder analysis,
Mm.
really, really true, like understanding exactly the different elements. And it doesn't have to be, to the individual employee level, but it can't be like everyone in the US,
Sure.
everyone in
Yeah.
Canada. It needs to be a little bit more
Like persona-based
granular.
type of.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Trying to get to that level and really understanding how do they want to be communicated to. We talked about it at the beginning, the podcast a little bit. There has never been so many different types, even just generationally, people in the workplace. Magnify that to different countries, different regions, cultures, languages. I mean, trying to create a change plan, like I feel like we have been doing for such a long time, that is towards or geared towards like an average person, of which doesn't exist,
Right.
is
Sure.
just so flawed,
Yeah.
and so and it took me a while to come to that realization, and so trying to create space to do that work up front, I know is gonna really pay dividends in the long run. And so I think setting up that structure where you've got kind of this global guiding principle, and then creating the space to do that stakeholder analysis to really understand like what do the people in each of the regions locally need, so that you can customize approach to them, and then do it and build in those feedback mechanisms and the space that when you gather that feedback, you're going to do something with it, is super important. Builds that trust early, and they're going to be the ones who are going to tell you when your approach doesn't work, because it won't work. It won't.
Mhm.
But at least you're going to hear it, and you're not going to hear silence and just continue down a wrong path. And so if you can do all those three things, I think you're in solid shape.
Right on.
That's great. That's great.
Can I ask a quick question? It's not a quick
course.
question.
I figured.
And I know we're running up on time here,
No, go for it.
but I can't help but to think, like, what inspired you to get into change management? A little of your origin story, and then specifically moving down this path towards being inclusive. Like, what brings you to that, and then doing this as an independent?
Yeah, it's an interesting, story, I think. I think for me, I never really knew what I wanted to do growing up.
Mhm.
My background's in psychology, so that's what I did my undergrad in. And I had dreams of being a therapist my whole life. And realized after my first class, I think, of abnormal psychology, I was like, I'm not strong enough for this.
Right? Yep.
It's, I do not have the strength to do this, I don't think. And so, but I loved psychology, so I stuck with it. And, my parents were both in business. And so I kind of went the business banking path, and, started to try and figure out by like doing, learning by doing a bit, to be like, all right, I'm going to try some work in the branch, and maybe I'll go into the contact center, and maybe I'll work in risk. And risk got me a little bit closer. I was like, oh, like this is kind of really interesting, like trying to like anticipate what people are going to do and try to
Sure.
avoid or prevent it. I was like, oh, that's like really, really interesting. And then got into change management by accident. Just one of my old bosses that I used to work with got into it, said there was a spot on the team. I'm like, sure. I don't know what this is. And I fell in love with the idea of being the voice of people who didn't have a voice at the table, and I really, really took that seriously, almost sometimes too seriously, but I really enjoyed that. And I found so much purpose in this type of work. What got me to leave my, the employment and kind of go on my own was that I felt like there was more I could do to be that voice independently than I could by following an approach that was pushed down to me. You know,
Mm.
I I felt like in terms of empathy and compassion for people who are going through this change, any change, I think was my secret weapon. You know,
Mhm.
it's something that I can do very well. And I like to think so. I like to think that people feel comfortable to share with me what they're feeling and that I'm not going to betray them, you know,
Sure.
or rat them out. And I think for me, that's what gives me so much purpose in doing what I do. And I think I had such a desire to help people, you know, as a therapist growing up. And this is as close as I think I'll ever get, given the limitations of my emotional capacity.
Right on.
So that's what got me here.
Perfect. I
That's a
love
cool
that.
story. Thank
That's
you for sharing.
yeah, very cool. Yeah,
That's very
absolutely.
cool.
So, well, fellas, we are just about at that time, right? So,
Yeah.
Andrew, how can people get in touch with you, learn more? Yeah, find you on the internet, all the things.
All the
But
things. Yeah, I'm a pretty basic person when it comes to that. I
there's
think
nothing basic about you, man.
yeah, I appreciate that, Rich. Thank you. Well, you can find out more about, you know, what we do at Reroute by visiting our website at rerouteconsulting.com. Best way to contact me is probably through LinkedIn, I'll be honest.
Okay,
So if
sure.
you just search, you know, Andrew Ourique on LinkedIn, you'll find me. Um, and that's probably the best way to connect with me if you have any questions about, you know, what we
Awesome.
shared here. But I want to say thank you both for giving me the platform, the opportunity to chat. I can't believe almost an hour has gone by already. It literally feels like 10 minutes.
I
So
know, right?
I,
It always does. It's like, boy, we
It's
could just
great.
keep it like episode after episode
I have
talking
I
so
about.
know
many I have so many more questions I'd love to ask you, Andrew. This has just been
I'm
so
not
fun.
going anywhere. I'm not going anywhere. So anytime you guys want to do this again,
All
I'm,
right.
I'm up for it.
Well, we've threatened to do a bit of
Awesome.
road shows, so maybe we'll come up to Toronto.
Ooh,
Ooh.
that would be great. Come when it's winter, man. It's beautiful up here.
Oh yeah, so we can go around tapping trees and
I love that.
just
Yeah, exactly.
do do you guys do like
Like
maple
maple
syrup
syrup
keg
shots.
stands or something like that?
Oh man, I wish. I don't know if you could do that, but if you could, I'm game.
Yeah.
Let's give it a shot.
All right.
You know?
Right on.
That would be fun. Um, Andrew, Rich, if it's okay, just to kind of start wrapping things up at the top of the show,
Do it.
we teased sort of the one thing that people can
One
do to make their changes feel most inclusive. And I'm curious, you've shared so many good ideas, and I'm curious if you have one thing that you would call out from all of that. If a place could just start somewhere or do one thing and they only achieve that, it would get them so much further down the road. What would that be?
Oh yeah. I've got a few ideas. I think honestly the easiest one is to pick a random person that is involved in your change, who's being impacted by your change, have a conversation with them. You know, just
I love that.
not to just to understand what they're going through. And when you have that conversation, think to the plan that you've got in place and really commit to taking another look at it and saying, is this plan going to work for this one individual? And if the answer is yes, great. You know, that's awesome. But chances are it might not. And understand that you need to have that flexibility and don't hold yourself don't worry so much about being perfect. You know, like it's impossible for us to be perfect. You know, whether your change is 1,000 people or 10 people, or 10,000 people.
That's
The
right.
odds of you being able to like do exactly what that person needs for 10,000 people is impossible, you know?
Sure.
So don't be so hard on yourself and be okay to be flexible, change what you initially had. It's not about getting it right. It's about doing what's right. And that
Mhm.
I think is really at the end of the day what we're trying to achieve here. You know, we really have to reframe that whole outcome and like what success for us looks like. And I think if you do that, you'll be surprised and everyone around you will be supportive of where you're going and help you get there because they feel like they can trust coming to you for advice and direction. And they're your best resource is the people that are actually going through the change, not anybody else. It's them. And so you're working for them at the end of the day.
Love
that.
it.
That's great. That's
Awesome.
great.
Well, thank you everybody for joining us on today's special podcast. Boy, I can't wait for this one to get out there. Ben, you want to take us out today?
Yeah. Andrew, thank you for being on the show. Until next time, make change your friend.
Thanks for listening to Harmonious Workplaces. You can find all episodes, resources, and ways to connect with us at www.harmoniousworkplaces.com. If you enjoyed the show, we'd love your feedback. Please rate, review, share, and subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on. And don't forget to add Harmonious Workplaces to your favorites so you're notified when new episodes are released. Again, visit us at www.harmoniousworkplaces.com.